Hello, everybody, and welcome to That Milan podcast where I messed up getting our guest for the day, where we have Jod coming on tomorrow. But obviously, with the news that broke today, we were going to have Wayne on anyway. So Wayne in Rome is back. If you guys remember him from his channel, he's been on a few times. We've been on his channel. You were just on Adrian from Robona TV's YouTube channel discussing the Dybala saga, which was crazy in itself. So guys, go and check that out. Go and subscribe to Wayne's YouTube channel as well. So Wayne, how are you first, and then Santangelo?
I'm good on the Roma front. I wish they were playing a little bit better, but I like the summer that they've had so far. I think the Mercato has been overall successful. We see even today Kevin Danso lands a former Atalanta target. You see those two sharing some of the same options, and it makes you feel like, okay, Roma's on the right track now if they're looking at the same players. So, of course, Sule, Dybala stays, Dolbik, La Liga's leading goal scorer. Danso is a former Ligue 1 Defender of the Year. So these are really great signings, I think, so far. Roma has lowered and changed their policy from signing these options who were like, hey, either free transfers and guys without clubs who were good, very good at one point, like what's the name? Like no, more like
Sanchez,
Wijnaldum.
Wijnaldum. Yeah, Wijnaldum's name escaped me for a second. That's how insignificant he was for Roma. And that to me was always wrong. Instead, you go for a young core, talented players. Now they could spend a little bit more with financial fair play relax. Enzo Lefe steps in. I really like him so far. Other players like Samuel Dahl at left back, Sangare, this new right back, young kid. So there's a lot of interesting players at Roma right now. It's just going to take some time for De Rossi to get a hold of things, I think.
Yeah. One of the bigger windows, I think we talked about it last time you were on here, and the direction that Roma should head in is this direction that they're in right now, because those deals were just short term. It seemed like you guys were just trying to make it into the Champions League and go from there instead of more of a clear-cut plan. But that's kind of what happens when you hire someone like Mourinho. But now with De Rossi, he's a younger manager, had success, obviously embarrassed Milan in Europa League and had a good end to the year, and you guys played more fluid football. Obviously, you haven't seen that translate just yet this season, but it's going to take a little bit of time. It's his first full season as a manager. So Matt, like kind of before we get into everything that's happening today, that seems like this deal is going to get over the line soon. Your thoughts on kind of Roma's transfer window and how they've looked so far, because keeping Dybala is what makes this more significant, because it felt like a lot of the wind was taken out of the sails if he was going to go to Saudi Arabia, because there was so much good that was going on, and then to lose your best player like that would have been devastating.
Yeah, I think Roma are definitely headed in the right direction. It's a more forward-thinking model that they're building, which I think is something that I've seen amongst a lot of the other Serie A clubs. You look at what Juventus are doing. Obviously, they're spending quite a bit. They sold a lot of young players. Jumanti Sule is the marquee, one of the ones they've sold. But you look at the ages of the players they brought in. Players that are either at the very early stages of their career and ready to take off, or players that have already taken off and they're in their prime. I mean, Coop Miners is one. Got Nico Gonzalez, who has had a couple years under his belt. So I think that Roma are kind of following a little bit of a similar model. Of course, they're still in the position where they're not quite able to spend, 100 million, 120 million on a market, because I think, what Juventus have done has been very impressive. But I think Roma have done really well to stay within the parameters and comfort of what they are comfortable spending for players. But I think when they earmark the player they like Sule, and they got him for a great price, I think that those are the types of moves that, Roma fans are going to look to in the next couple of years and thinking like, okay, those are the right moves at the right moment, because now you have, in many ways, similar to what Milan are doing, players that can grow together as a group. And now you reestablish a foundation, a framework of a team and a project. And I think for a while, the way Roma were approaching the market was, somewhat similar to Milan in the sense they were kind of just latching on to guys like free transfers and, hey, we can get this guy for cheap. Put him in. Let's see what he does. And now I think Roma have a pretty defined vision of what they want. So I've been very impressed with this Roma market so far. And of course, if they're able to get one or two other names in there, I think that can only make their market that much better.
Yeah, and the reason why we got Wayne on here today and what we were like anticipating was tomorrow before the schedule mix up was this, kind of not a bombshell, but pretty surprising based off of recent reports that we were reading. Tammy Abraham, there were links with Saudi Arabia. We saw the links with West Ham as of most recently as well. And you kind of knew that with the way Roma wanted to operate and get things over the line, Tammy Abraham was one of those sacrifices that they were going to make. I know Bove is another one of those players, but Tammy is one of those guys with the Dobiak signing that you knew his future here at Roma and his issues struggling to get back from injury and stay healthy were kind of detrimental to him. And Wayne, I know we talked at a certain time about how you didn't want to necessarily give Tammy up right away. And this is when the initial links between Tammy and Milan started. We know he's friends with Tomori and Loftus-Cheek because they grew up in Chelsea together. It kind of seems like Milan do need another striker. We knew earlier in the summer that there was rumors of Okafor, Jovic going opposite for this move, and Roma weren't interested in Jovic. Milan weren't interested in sending Okafor. So it kind of seemed like a stalemate. Paulo Fonseca, when Matt was there, was at Yankee Stadium, was hearing that he did like Alexis Salamakers, and Salamakers was somebody that he could find in the squad. Now it seems like Salamakers is going to be that player headed back in a deal where it seems like cash and player for Tammy Abraham. So the valuation's around 23 million euro. Alexis Salamakers is going to be around in that 13 million vicinity with 10 million in cash going back to Roma. Wayne, we'll go with you first here. Do you still have that same sentiment about Tammy Abraham? Do you think Roma are letting go of him a little too soon? Or they're risking a lot considering his injury history here? And Salamakers could be someone that could be useful and productive for De Rossi, that could play on either wing, is really a hard worker off of the ball, not obviously the most prolific of scorers, but, it kind of does fit that profile of what Chiesa is at this point in time in his career, where he's not necessarily a great scorer, but he could play on either wing and he could do stuff off the ball. Now, he's not of Chiesa's talent, but it's someone that could be a useful player for them as well. So start off with the Tammy side of things and then go what you think of Salamanders.
Fans are fickle, and I'm no exception in that, yes, when Roma had nobody else, it's like you can't give up Tammy just yet. See what happens. They sign Artem Dovbyk, and now that changes things. And I think that paved the way just to make it easy, simple for Tammy to leave emotionally as well as structurally, actually getting him out the door. Now that he goes to Milan, I'm not afraid of him strengthening a rival to Roma. I think that he's still a decent player. I am surprised that he's staying in Italy, especially after Milan had signed Morata, because that's an expensive transfer when you factor in his transfer fee and his heavy wages. So to see Milan move for that, I'm a little surprised that they would look at that option. I think there's probably other players, but you don't know. Fonseca could put Tammy in better positions, get him closer to goal, get some confidence. He's got good players around him. If Okafor is playing to his left, Milan have a decent signing. I'm looking for the word. You can tell I'm sleep deprived. A decent setup this year, I think, with the players that they've got behind them, and that they could feed Tammy really well. So if he gets going, then you could see a decent player out of him. You could see the type of player that is worth 20 to 25 mil. I mean, if he scores 10, 12 goals, it's hard to say that he wouldn't be worth that. On the flip side, Roma get a player that they need, as well as the cash that they are going to use for other operations and to close out this mercato. So for Roma, it's a win-win. We saw last season for Bologna, Salamakers had something like 6 goal creations or assists. It wasn't necessarily, I think it was 6 assists, but he also contributed to more goal-scoring actions as well under Mota. Now, playing under Mota and playing under De Rossi are two different things. We see Juventus flying high right now. Can De Rossi get that same thing out of him? Are Roma going to play a 3-5-2 where he won't even be included in the lineup? Or will it be a 4-3-3 as we've seen so far? I think it'll be the latter. There were some rumors today about with Dansbo and that it would be a 3-5-2. I don't think that's going to happen, though. So for me, Salamakers, it's a good move. I think it is. So I'm happy about it. And I also like the cash that's involved. Yeah. Would I have enjoyed Okafor a little bit more? Yeah, probably. But this is a good opportunity for Roma, and I think that it was good business, probably by both teams.
Matt, do you agree, or do you think this favors Roma a little bit more?
I think this favors Roma. I think that look, they're getting a player that in Alexis who doesn't have any extensive injury record, a player that's played Champions League games, a player that's played under multiple coaches and now, and those coaches have really loved having him. I mean, Pioli used him for the majority of his Scudetto winning season. Fonseca has praised him quite a bit, even though again he looks like he's going to be heading out the team. And then you have Thiago Motta, who used Alexis in ways that was able to help Bologna get into the Champions League. So it says a lot about how several coaches have loved having Alexis in the squad. This is going to be a player that Roma are going to love having around in the changing room. The fans are going to love him. De Rossi's going to love his work rate and energy. He feels he's a blue collar type attacking footballer. And I think as soon as he gets into this Roma team and he's on the training ground and he's mixing it up with these guys, they're going to love having him. And I think that he's going to have his moments to shine and make an impact at Roma. They might not be, extravagant. They might not be a plenty, but I think he's going to have those instances where, maybe Sule can't play or, you need something off the bench a little bit different. And those late moments of the game where tired legs come in and Salamaker's is pressing, he's winning the ball and he helps you secure, those crucial points where otherwise maybe Roma last year would have lost them. So I do like that they're getting a player that they can also use, but I also think the money component is key because if you start kind of throwing together everything with Roma and what they're trying to do in the latter days of this market, they're trying to get rid of Zalewski, who's got 1 year left on his contract. PSV are interested. Apparently, they're offering a decent sum. Now you get 10 million in the swap here. Now Roma are in a position where they can play around a little bit. They can get a player on a permanent deal, which is a little bit more appealing than going to a team that's saying, hey, I'll give you a loan with an option. We could give you cash right now. That's our player. And I think that could be crucial in the whole potential Manu Kone situation if Milan aren't able to shed the weight in their team and get things figured out there. On the Milan side of things, Tammy is a move that feels like it's more reminiscent of the latter days of the Berlusconi era in the sense that there's a player there. Everyone in this conversation knows there's a player there. We've seen it in Serie A. We've seen it in England. We've seen it in the Championship. He's done it before, Tammy. But I think there's a player that really needs the opportunity to get confidence. And when you look in this team, how many more minutes is he going to get to start against Morata or even Jovic if Jovic stays? Or dare I say if Camarda makes that way up and now all of a sudden Camarda is too good to put on the bench? Does Tammy have the resolve, the character at this stage of his career to overcome that? And I think that's a little bit of a concern for me, on top of the fact that we haven't seen him string together consistent enough football since his injury. So at 26, it's not a bad move for Milan. I'm not saying that. But it's one of those moves that I think that if you're a Milan fan, it's not one that's going to be like, okay, we got Tammy Abraham. They're going to be like, all right, we got Tammy Abraham. All right, I guess that's going to be the guy we're going with, because they went from Xerxes for 40 million to Morata, which you and I like, Martino, and I'm sure Wayne you like as well. He's a good quality, player with good pedigree. And then now you go from, okay, now we're getting Tammy Abraham too. Like we're not addressing the striker market. We're not addressing the striker area, excuse me. But I will say this is my last point, is when they went from Xerxes to Morata to Tammy and potentially keeping Jovic, what it does tell me is that they're so focused on building out this Milan Futuro team because they signed Turco, who's a young striker from Salzburg, and they really truly believe in Camarda. And I believe the signings they're making in the striker area are to not block the pathway for those players to come through.
Yeah, I think you're right there because Tammy's injury. I find Tammy's whole situation interesting because he was flying in that first season. A lot of the goals came in Conference League, but it doesn't matter because they won it. It's a trophy. It's regardless, right? I always found I never liked the Mourinho project. I understand the ambition behind it. I understood what you guys were trying to do and winning something, and it was a success because there was a trophy drought. But overall, the plan and the project and the play, like we saw what happened in Serie A. I still believe to this day the last team that had the highest point total for Roma was Paulo Fonseca led. So they still haven't surpassed that points total, which has been frustrating because there have been signs of them showing quality in the league. And I don't think Tammy played in the best team possible for him to develop as a player and get the best chances created for him. Because when Dybala came, Tammy was out because of that injury. So he didn't have that quality of player around him. We talked about it at length. Lorenzo Pellegrini, the amount of times that he was misused under Mourinho was astonishing. It bothered me. I don't think they did a good job of that. And that's kind of where the negative and the numbers that you were, or lack thereof, from Tammy at that time was kind of reflective of the system that Roma had in place. It wasn't always necessarily on him, but the injury record is startling. It's not good. And when you're sort of putting in that risk, you're sitting there saying to yourself, okay, Okafor can maybe fill in, Camarda can maybe fill in, and then you have Jovic. And the rumors are that Jovic would be offloaded most likely in this situation, but he's not fully convinced. I still don't understand how he got the number 9, but that's still a separate conversation. I don't want to rehash. But that's kind of the thing here with Tammy is like he's 26. Morata is still relatively young for Serie A, right? We know like 31 might as well be 28. And when you have those two situations, you're kind of looking at it like, okay, how many minutes is Tammy going to play? The way I look at it is like this. Tammy for 90 minutes is better as a backup if Morata can't play, is far better than Luka Jovic. Because Luka Jovic, as we've seen over the course of 90 minutes, cannot produce. He's been fine as a sub. He's been very strong in that area where he's coming off the bench and he's producing. But when we see him for 90 minutes, he's gone for 80 of them. And that's a serious problem because we've already seen an injury from Morata. And I know it's not great because Tammy has injury history. But if you're the backup and you're not solely relied upon like Tammy would be, then I think that's a good situation. But it kind of gets a little confusing, Matt, to what you were alluding to, because it's like, okay, how does Camarda fit in here? Because how long are you keeping Morata and Tammy now? Because you have them for a couple of years, right? You sign Morata to that contract. You sign Tammy to that contract. Is it as simple as a flip for next summer for one of these two players, or 2 years down the line because Morata can go get a deal from Saudi or elsewhere because he's a single man now, so he doesn't really have to worry too much about that kind of stuff? Or do you put him in this situation where you're kind of like worried about, Tammy is succeeding and maybe he does potentially block Camarda? It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Ultimately, I think Tammy is an upgrade relative to Jovic. Now, we don't have that much time with you, Wayne and Matt, so we'll jump to the Manu Kone thing here. We know Roma need to offload players. We also know Milan need to offload players, primarily of the Benacer ilk and the Luka Jovic ilk. I think it's more so on the Benacer side of thing. They offloaded 2 players in the midfield positions, and Tommaso Pobega off to Bologna, and then Yassine Adli obviously just signed with Fiorentina with a loan plus option. We'll talk about that stuff tomorrow with Jad. But Kone here, it seems like there's only 2 teams, and it's Milan and Roma. It's probably a race to see who could get rid of their quote-unquote dead weight sooner. Wayne, where are Roma on this side of things? Because from all reports, it indicates whoever is able to pay the fee first, Kone is okay with going to that club. So where are Roma on that front in offloading players and having the ability to bring him in?
It looks like Zalewski and Eduardo Bove are those last 2 entities that need to get pushed out. The latest report is Nottingham Forest was in for Bove. Previous to that, it was Fiorentina, but now we see Adli has signed for them. I think that's over. Bove's run out of options. I think it's unfortunate for him. He's been a good player. Great, no, but I think his issue is that he had a ceiling, and I don't think that management sees that he's going to surpass that. When De Rossi came in, he started to transition him from a starter into a second choice. So his future at the club is compromised. I think the same goes for Zalewski. Zalewski has a way of doing very well on an international level, but then all of his performances for Roma have just been stinkers for over the past 2 years. Under Mourinho, he had a couple of good games as a left wing back, but then I always felt that he was more of a natural left winger. Even there, just not that good. So
I did the decision to sit SES and start him in the opening game was a little head scratching. Yeah. And I guess maybe that was like sort of like a audition of sorts to see like, hey, this is kind of your last chance type thing.
Yeah, that's what that kind of felt like it, didn't it? But to not start El Shaarawy regardless did feel like a mistake. So
That's our guy.
there comes a time. It's like we always want young players to be at the focal point and to grow. But there's a difference of just starting players from the Primavera that are good versus rather for the sake of it. Do they have the bones to really develop? Can they become something special, quote unquote, like Fratesi, Scamacca, unfortunately he's injured now, and other players who have gone on,
Calafiori.
and Calafiori, of course. So there's always that risk of letting them go too early. But Roma find themselves now on the opposite end of the spectrum, in that they've reached their ceiling. That's it. They're going to look for other decisions. I'm hoping they sign Kone. I feel very much that he is the missing player in midfield. They need somebody technical like him, somebody faster. Cristante is a half-hour conversation on his own, maybe an hour, or maybe a novel at this point with how long his career has gone. It's just crazy. It's baffling. I'm not going to hate on him because, look, he has played his contract. He plays every single minute. He does what's asked of him. You can't get mad at him because he's selected. Like, he has a technical level. That's it. He can't surpass it. Like, can't hate the.
It's not his fault. He keeps getting called up.
It's not his fault. So I can't throw too much shade at him. But here we are, and I hope that Roma edges Milan because I think he's legit. This is a player that a lot of teams wanted, a lot of top level teams, even in the Premier League. So to me, he has the qualities that are missing: play on the half turn, his back to goal, and to receive the pass, hold off opponents. He's got some really nice dribbling skills, which are like kind of lanky. He has this way of like pushing the ball past the pressing opponent. So I like his skill set. I think he'd be something different. And if you can get rid of these guys for a very nice all-around deeper midfielder, I think he would really help Roma make that push back into the Champions League, and who knows what else.
Yeah, Kone, Matt, he was unbelievable in the Olympics, if anybody was able to watch that. Gladbach, I haven't been able to watch too much of them, but anytime the conversation is around them, his name pops up. He's just that sort of player. And then Milan and Roma are kind of operating still in that Milan still, despite all these great financial successes on the balance sheet, are still kind of profiling similar players to this. And it's not necessarily a bad deal for Milan, but this doesn't bring the balance that they need, right? This is still a little bit more of the similar profiles of the good players that they have, right? Of like Reinders and I mean, Loftus-Cheek is only good as a box-to-box, not as a 10 or double pivot, but not trying to hate. But like Reinders as well. Do you think that this is the right type of player that Milan need, or is this just more of the overall quality is increased within the squad, but he's not necessarily the best of fits if you're sticking with this 4-2-3-1 double pivot?
It's a typical Milan signing in this era. They're asking for 20 million. Milan are trying to lowball him a little bit and get him for 15. Milan, I've liked this player for 3-4 years now. He chose Borussia Mönchengladbach a couple of years ago, and now he's ready for that next move, that next natural step up. So I think that Milan are trying to see if they can kind of rekindle that relationship they maybe had with him years ago and say, hey, now is the time to come join Milan. We have a lot of good players here. The project's in a healthier state. But I look at what Roma's building and their midfield, and I look at what Milan have in their midfield, and I almost feel as though he's a better fit for what Roma need. I think if we're going to continue to trot out a double pivot, I don't see him as someone we're going to bring in and all of a sudden he's going to be our starting number 10. I don't see him coming in here and all of a sudden unseating Tijani Reinders or Fofana or even Ruben Loftus-Cheek. So many of the issues and concerns and questions I had with Lazar Samardzic, discussions that Milan were engaged in before he went to Atalanta, kind of remain with Kone here, because it feels as though that Milan are just getting another midfielder, and it's fine because they're raising the overall quality of their midfield.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I kind of scratch my head and look at Kone, and I'm thinking, like, I think the obvious move for you is probably to go to Roma if we're talking purely on sporting and going and not getting opportunity. Whereas going to Milan, it's like you're going to be one of the guys. You might play Champions League football, but at the same time, how much are you going to play? Is this going to be another conversation of us getting a Yassine Adli type where he's promising good somewhere, he's at the good age, Milan are buying him before he booms and hits the market, and then they don't know what to do with him when they get him? That's what it feels like with me, with Kone. So I think that what Milan are doing here feels, in my opinion, that it's improper planning. And I think for that reason, I think that Roma is the better choice. Now, he's a player I like, but I kind of wonder, again, what Fonseca is going to do with him in this team. I think there's a lot of the qualities that Wayne mentioned that you can like there. And it's interesting, too, because as Wayne was talking, I was thinking of, when Milan were going after Renato Sanchez, and then Renato Sanchez went to Roma. And I'm like, Sanchez kind of has some similar profile and characteristics to Kone, like a player that can receive back to goal, a good athlete, good carrier, technical. I think that Kone has a lot of those same characteristics. Now, Kone has the help on his side and the legs on his side. But I just feel, again, that if we're speaking purely on fit here, I think that Kone would be better going to Roma for his career because I think he'll just get more opportunity to play regularly under De Rossi than he will under Fonseca.
Yeah, it'll be really difficult for him. Even Musa and Loftus-Cheek's trajectory at Milan, like, do they stay past next summer? That's kind of like the only angle you would have here, in my opinion, where it's like, okay, there are your minutes. And I do think he's better than both of those players and what he would fit for me. But you're right. Like, the Roma situation is probably best for him. And we'll see what happens because at this point, like all the reports are saying, he's agreed to either move. It's going to come down to who can get the money over the line.
Martino, getting Kone, who's 23, right? 22, 23.
Youngster, yep.
With the guys we have, what does this mean for Musa?
I have a whole loaded conversation. We can't keep on Wayne for here too long. So that's a separate conversation that we could discuss if Wayne will hop off here in a second. But we just want to thank him for coming on because he's so busy. He's sleep deprived. He's a dad of 2. So again,
2 under 2.
2 under 2. Geez.
God bless him.
Yeah, look at him. He's got the same plan like his club. Just buy young, right? But again, we appreciate you so much, brother. Again, guys, Wayne in Rome, great YouTube channel if you're interested in Roma and all things like that. Wayne's a great guy, not like some of those sort of crazy accounts that you see on Twitter. But again, Wayne is awesome. So please go and subscribe to him, follow him everywhere. Everything's been in here. It'll be in the description of the video. Anything else, Wayne, before you head on out?
Thanks, guys. We'll catch up off the record soon. Thanks for having me.
Okay. All right. Talk soon, brother.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, that was Wayne in Rome. Wayne's awesome. So if you wanted to discuss this thing a little bit further and we can end off on it. Okay. To answer your question, I don't think personally, I don't think it makes sense to keep Loftus-Cheek and Musa. If you're going with this double pivot, it makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. Neither are a 10, neither are a double pivot. We know this. I think there was like some hope that Musa could develop into a defensive midfielder that can make smarter decisions. But as we've seen by his comments, which were horrid, you do not comment on that. Stevie P was saying this too on the Milan Weekly podcast. I can't help but agree with it. Ali and the fellas said the same thing. You do not, under any circumstance, go out and say, okay, guys, that you have no idea what you're doing in terms of not knowing whether to attack or to defend. You should never admit that. Even if it's got any bit of ounce of truth to it, you do not admit that. 1, you throw your manager under the bus. 2, you put yourself in a situation where you come across as clueless, and you don't want to do that. There was issues throughout that Parma game, which we'll discuss tomorrow with Jod because of the scheduling issues. But overall, the issues are still persisting for Milan that were there last year. And it seems to me that if you don't know what to do with Loftus-Cheek, you don't know what to do with Yunus Musa, and the plan still seems to reflect that because you're buying Kone now or attempting to buy him and you're offloading Benacer. That's interesting to me because at the end of the day, what is the real plan? Is the plan to go with a 3-man midfield where this all makes a lot more sense? Or if you're sticking to this 2-man midfield in the double pivot with a number 10, then this makes less sense because why are you starting Loftus-Cheek at the number 10? Why are you interested in putting other players at the number 10? It could be Reinders. When you have a Liberali, when does Liberali get a chance? I think that all these questions are so important that Milan have to figure out because time and time again, when we see Milan get dominated by a side like Parma that just sits back, absorbs the press, or a disorganized press in this instance, they just score on the counter. It was so easy for them. And when you have the midfielder that started the game saying he didn't know what to do, that's a problem. And when the guy who was starting at the number 10 in Loftus-Cheek, who was productive in terms of a goal scorer last year in the Europa League, it's still not what you want, because you know Loftus-Cheek is not a 10. He cannot press like that. He has an injury history. He is clearly better as a box-to-box midfielder. The best version of Ruben Loftus-Cheek was the one that we saw with PSG. Okay, not with PSG, against PSG in the Champions League. If you get that version of Loftus-Cheek, or even when they played Roma last year, where he was the best player on the pitch before Tomori got that double yellow and he was sent off, you knew that Milan playing with a three-man midfield was the way forward. We're going to probably discuss that tomorrow with John, but ultimately, you guys let me know in the comments below. I think a three-man midfield is the way to go for Milan. With this personnel, I would be okay with the 4-2-3-1 if you had the balance and the players that fit that stylistically. Right now, what we know with the personnel and the formation that they're moving forward with, they don't fit. It doesn't make sense. It's square pegs in a round hole. This is what's so frustrating about watching Milan at this point in time, is that you know there's talented players and players that could be useful in a different formation that isn't a 4-2-3-1. Loftus-Cheek, Musa, Fofana, Tijani Reinders, all these midfielders, and even if Benacer were to stay, are not double pivot midfielders. Sure, some of them could adapt to it in a certain way, but we all know they're best utilized as box-to-box, mezzalas, number 8s, whatever the hell you want to call it, midfielders. We all know that is the way to go when you're talking about Milan and their personnel in the midfield. Now, when you're trying to force something that isn't there, then you're going to have problems like you did against Parma. You're going to have problems like you did against Torino, and basically the same issues that were persisting with Stefano Pioli just last season into this season. It doesn't stop. It hasn't stopped. They have to stop the bleeding as soon as possible. Again, that's something that we'll discuss tomorrow. And Matt, I'm not sure really where he is at this point in time. Maybe he can give me an update with this. But the overall idea and consensus is, if you get Manu Kone in here, like Matt was saying, you elevate the level of the squad. But if you don't, you kind of are putting yourself in a weird position where an aging player like Benacer is no longer able to do much there. We have Matt back. So Matt, everything I was doing trying to carry us right there, like most players do in the midfield. I mean, you have to agree with what I'm saying, because I know we talk about this at length. Personnel does not fit formation. So why force the formation when it doesn't fit the personnel? Is this a matter of they need time to adjust? If Fofana and Reinders are there in a double pivot, is it tolerable? But you still don't want Loftus-Cheek as the number 10. It's just, to me, it's like, just go with the 4-3-3. Stop forcing anything with that. Because at I think you could literally do this. And tell me if you disagree. Because Loftus-Cheek, regardless, I don't think he should be at Milan long term, because I don't think he's that level of player and what they need to win a Champions League, right? Because that's ultimately the goal for me. I know it's good at and all this other stuff, but Loftus-Cheek as the 10 doesn't work. Loftus-Cheek as the double pivot doesn't work. However, could I interest you in a three-man midfield of Tijani Reinders on the left, Fofana centrally, and Loftus-Cheek on the right side? And then you play with your wingers, whether it's Pulisic or Chukwueze at the right wing, whoever starts with Morata and Tammy up top, if that deal gets over the line, and then obviously Leao/Okafor on the left wing. And then you obviously have that back four with Teo, Pavlovic, Tomori, and then I guess Emerson Royale. It's whatever, it's the right back situation. But seriously, is that the way to go? And when does he do that? Is he going to give time to these players to assimilate, or that's too risky because you're 5 points behind Juve, you're 3 points behind Inter already 2 games into the season. You have Lazio this weekend, and then the derby is coming up not too long after with the match with Venezia. So this is a really dire time here. So what do you think about all that? I know it's a lot. And then we'll finish.
Crazy that we have to preface you say that it's such a dire time and we're only 2 matches in, but
it's true.
It's true. It's true. That's the truth of the matter, because I think that, unlike last year where Milan had a bunch of new players coming in, it was crucial. It was paramount that they got off to a good start, and they did. Now you see where they ended in the season, and you see where they were as far as distance off Inter and in the conversation for top 4. This is going to be a stronger top 4 chase, in my opinion, based on what Atalanta's doing, based on what Roma's doing, whether you like Napoli and what they've done or not, and believe in the Conte ADL marriage. regardless, there's going to be a lot more competition for 5 spots.
Yeah.
And I think that if Milan are getting off to a really difficult start and they're grasping at formations and grasping at what players need to play certain areas, I think that's going to set off a lot of alarm bells amongst Milan fans. Like, this guy doesn't have the answers. He doesn't know what's going on. And look, I'm not saying that I'm Fonseca out. It's 2 games. No. I'm not going to go that route, guys. But I do think that with the personnel we have, the 4-3-3 feels more of a suited formation for what we have.
And they started with that last year, and it was going well until they approached the Inter game terribly, and then he just abandons it.
I look at the midfielders, and I'm like, the profiles, the quality. We have names that we can put on the field in the midfield. You can put Fofana, Reinders, Ruben Loftus-Cheek. There's balance there. There's physicality. There's ball progression. There's technical ability. And you're not really infringing too much on the attack. The 4-2-3-1 feels like a way to accommodate the whole, do I play Pulisic or do I play Chukwueze situation? That's what it feels like to me. And personally, I think there's going to come a point in time this year where we learn that maybe Chukwueze and Pulisic can't coexist at the same time. Maybe,
I don't think, yeah.
Maybe it's got to be one or the other. And that's okay. You need to have options. But at the same time, I think that this Lazio game is going to be telling, because if Fonseca puts out a 4-2-3-1 again, and it looks like maybe Fofana might not even be ready for this game. I mean, there was something put out by Sempre Milan regarding his fitness for this game.
We'll talk tomorrow about it.
If we see that the results are not there in the 4-2-3-1 again, the calls are only going to be louder for a formation change, because everyone is thinking this 4-3-3. Everyone talks 4-3-3. 4-3-3. This is the type of formation Milan should be playing. It's a more modern approach. It gives you the attacking guys you need up front. It gives you more balance in the midfield, in my opinion. I was never truly a big fan of the double pivot, and I think that we've kind of stuck to it too long, where I think it's quite clear that we have options to go with, and I think we can go with a 4-3-3, and I think it could kind of simplify what we do in the midfield. But again, I'm not the coach. It's only 2 games in, so we have to wait and see how these newer guys integrate. But yeah, it's just kind of odd to me.
Yeah, and just a final update regarding the market stuff. So this really just came across our desk right here. So we have great timing with all of this stuff. So this is regarding the Benacer sale and the rumor to Al-Qadisiyah. And this is from their sporting director, or just a member of one of them. It said that our 8 spots for foreigners over 20 years old are now full. We have them completed, so we are not working to sign Ismail Benacer. Benacer, for those of you that don't know, has not been training for 3 days straight. So it's easy. And I tweeted it this morning, and people were still responding like, oh, no, he's on his way out. I was like, well, I had to think, is it an injury or is this guy on his way out? Because you had to think about it. Because these moves wouldn't take that long when you're here at the end of the market for a sale like that. Because these clubs, we know their financial power. We know what they can offer. If they were willing to offer what they knew and what they had, then they would have done so. So we'll see. It does look like, as of right now, Benacer will not be moving to the rumored team that he was linked to. So that changes the entire market. Could have been a wash of a conversation with Wayne on Kone there, and Kone could have just been on his way to Roma. But we'll see. We covered all those. I'm sure
the Milan fans are they're taking this really well, and everyone's having a nice civil conversation on Twitter.
I'm sure they'll blame us for our accents in the comments below, but we do appreciate every single one of you guys. MLM podcast with Max and Gino, they just had a new episode come out, so go and check them out. Sempre Milan also just had their episode. Milan Weekly podcast, Milan Costa Costas tonight with Fabio and Gio. You also have other podcasts, Hold Hard, Rossonero, Serie A Sit Down, and then a bunch of other stuff, obviously, Wayne, that you guys should go and check out. But seriously, this is dire days on the market for Milan as of today, August 28th. Doesn't seem like any more outgoing players. Really depends on that. We'll see what happens at the 11th hour. But Matt, where can people follow you and find you at Matt_Santangelo? We're one audio listen away from 9,000 Spotify plays. Thank you guys so much for that.
Yeah, on Twitter is where you can find all my takes, my tweets, all that good stuff, all my opinions, whatever. It's just all there.
and his writing and all that sort of stuff. You could obviously follow me at Martino Puccio. Follow us at that Milan Pod as well. And subscribe to us here on YouTube. Stay if you're new. Comment your thoughts on the transfer market. Tomorrow we will have Jad of Bara Bravas on. So little scheduling dumb play by myself. Obviously,
Yeah, you guys should have seen like the behind the scenes of like
no. They should
wheeling and dealing.
not have seen that. Just let it go. It's fine. We'll discuss it tomorrow. But yeah, seriously, guys, the support has been immense. So congratulations to you. My fuck up was double the content for this week. So congratulations. It's all free. Please subscribe, follow, like. And again, we really appreciate all of your support. It's always a lot of fun. Win, lose, draw. We're always here. Like we have been for, oh my God, Matt, it's been like 8 years now. So thank you guys so much. Take care. See you later.